She walked in crying to quit her job, but the CEO locked the door and said, "You're staying with me." Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's go back to our main character. The rain tapped against the glass walls of the Carter and Lane corporate tower, a rhythm that matched the chaos in her chest. It was 6:45 p.m. Most of the office lights were off, except for the one at the far end, the CEO's office. Her name was Mia Torres, 26 years old, marketing associate. Overworked, underpaid, invisible. She stood in the hallway, clutching a crumpled resignation letter, soaked slightly at the edges where her tears had fallen earlier in the bathroom. Her reflection in the glass door showed swollen eyes, and mascara smudged under them like war paint. She took a breath that trembled halfway out. She'd practiced this moment all afternoon. Walk in, hand over the letter, leave quietly, no drama. But as she pushed open the heavy glass door, her throat locked. "Mr. Carter," she said, her voice breaking. He didn't look up right away. Liam Carter, 34, tall, sharp suit, the kind of man who carried silence like armor, was staring at a contract on his screen. "You're still here?" he asked, tone distracted. Mia stepped forward, holding out the letter. "I'm sorry, sir. I came to give you this." He finally turned, his gaze flicking from the letter to her trembling hand to her face. "What's this?" "My resignation," she said. "Effective immediately." Her voice cracked on the last word. For a long second, there was only the hum of the air conditioner and the faint sound of thunder outside. He leaned back slowly, studying her. "You're quitting?" "Yes. I can't." Her breath hitched. "I can't keep doing this." "Doing what?" His tone sharpened. "Working or surviving?" That question, so simple, so sharp, made her chest tighten. She swallowed hard. "Both," she whispered. "I've been working 16-hour days since January. I get blamed for mistakes that aren't mine. My mom's in the hospital, and I can't keep pretending I'm fine." Her voice dissolved mid-sentence, tears spilling over despite her trying to blink them back. She turned toward the door, mortified, but then click. The soft metallic sound made her freeze. Liam had stood up and locked the office door behind her. Her heart pounded. "Mr. Carter, sit down," he said, quietly but firmly. "No, I shouldn't." "Mia, sit down." Something in his tone wasn't anger. It was concern, the kind that comes from seeing someone break when they've tried too long to stay strong. She hesitated, then sank into the chair across from his desk, clutching the letter like a lifeline. He took it gently from her fingers, set it on the table and said, "You're not quitting." Her brow furrowed, confusion cutting through her fear. "What?" He exhaled slowly, leaning forward. "I've been watching you hold this place together while people twice your pay crumble. You don't walk away like this. Not tonight, not crying. You're staying with me." The words hung between them, quiet but unshakable. Rain streaked down the windows, and for the first time in months, Mia didn't know whether she wanted to run or finally let someone stay. The air in the office felt heavier after those words. Mia stared at Liam across the wide mahogany desk, her heart thudding so loudly she could barely hear the rain outside. The man everyone called cold and untouchable was now standing just a few feet away, sleeves rolled up, his expression softer than she had ever seen. "Why?" she finally whispered. "Why do you care if I quit?" Liam leaned against the edge of the desk, folding his arms, his eyes steady. "Because people like you are the reason this company still has a soul." He paused, the sound of the rain filling the silence. "Do you even know what you have done here, Mia?" She shook her head. "I stay late because no one else does." "Exactly," he said quietly. "Every week, you are the first one in and the last one out. You fix the mistakes no one admits. You have more heart than the entire board combined." His tone was not flattering, it was almost regretful. Mia blinked, unsure how to respond. For months, she had convinced herself no one noticed, that her hard work dissolved into the endless hum of deadlines. "You are exaggerating," she murmured, looking away. "Am I?" he asked. I read your reports, every single one, even the ones your supervisor took credit for. Her head snapped up in disbelief. He smiled faintly. Yes, I know about that too. He walked toward the coffee machine, poured a cup, and slid it toward her. Drink. You look like you have not slept in days. The aroma filled the room, bitter and grounding. Her fingers brushed the warm paper cup. Why are you telling me this now? She asked. Liam looked out the window for a long moment before answering. Because I used to be you. Before all this, before the suits, the money, the pressure, I was just another kid working 2 jobs, trying to prove I deserved to be in the room. His voice lowered. And then I forgot what that felt like. The confession disarmed her. She had only known him as the CEO everyone feared, the man who built Carter and Lane into a powerhouse through precision and control. But in that moment, he was just human. When did you stop forgetting? She asked. He turned back to her, a small, sad smile playing at the corner of his mouth. The night you stayed to finish the charity proposal after everyone else left. You did not know I was still in the building. You were humming to yourself, completely exhausted, but still fixing every slide so the numbers would be perfect. Mia felt her throat tighten. That proposal was canceled. Because I canceled it, he admitted. The board wanted to scrap it, said it was not profitable. I agreed. But I read it later at home, and I could not sleep. You wrote a line in there that said, "A company's worth is measured not by its profit margin, but by how it treats its people." I built an empire and somehow forgot that truth. You reminded me. The silence that followed was thick with something unspoken, respect, maybe even guilt. Mia pressed her hands together, overwhelmed. I did not mean to lecture anyone. I just believed it. And that is why you cannot quit, Liam said gently. Because if you leave, the people who break others win. A small laugh escaped her, shaky and wet with tears. You make it sound like I am some kind of hero. You are, he said simply, and heroes do not walk away when the story gets hard. For the first time that night, Mia smiled, weak but real. The storm outside began to quiet, the rain easing into a soft drizzle. Liam reached for the resignation letter still lying on his desk. He tore it neatly in half, then in half again, and dropped the pieces into the trash. There, he said. Now it does not exist. You cannot just decide that, she said, though her voice lacked conviction. I just did, he replied with a hint of a grin. He walked back to the window, hands in his pockets, eyes lost in the city lights. Tomorrow you take the day off, visit your mother. I will handle things here. She frowned. You cannot cover for me. Watch me. She opened her mouth to protest again, but something in his tone made her stop. It was not arrogance. It was care, quiet and firm. He turned to her once more. Mia, you have carried this company long enough. Let someone carry you for a change. For a heartbeat, she could not speak. The woman who had walked in, ready to quit, now sat in stunned silence, realizing that maybe, just maybe, this was not the end of her story, but the moment it began to heal. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the blinds of Mia's small apartment, warm but unfamiliar after months of waking before dawn. For once, her alarm did not jolt her into panic. She turned it off and lay there, blinking at the ceiling, trying to remember when she last felt rested. On the nightstand sat her phone, vibrating with new messages. 3 missed calls from her supervisor, 1 from Human Resources, and a short text from an unknown number that read, "This is Liam Carter. Do not come in today. Spend the time where it matters." She almost laughed. The CEO of Carter and Lane sending her a text felt absurd, but it was real. She stared at it for a long moment before her phone buzzed again, a photo this time. It was a delivery confirmation from a pharmacy near the hospital. Prescription, Maria Torres. Payment, Carter and Lane corporate account. Mia's eyes stung. Her mother's medication had been delayed for days because insurance would not cover the new dosage. She had not told anyone, not even her closest friend at work. Somehow, he knew. By the time she arrived at the hospital, her mother was sitting upright, smiling faintly. "Baby, someone just came by," her mother said, her voice still frail but warmer than before. Tall man, nice suit, said he was your boss. Left flowers and paid the bill. Mia froze, unsure whether to feel grateful or embarrassed. "He should not have done that," she murmured. Maybe he did it because you deserve it, her mother said gently. Sometimes, people surprise us when we need it most. Later, as Mia walked down the hospital corridor, she caught her reflection in a glass panel, still tired, still uncertain, but lighter somehow. That night, she returned to her apartment to find a sealed envelope slipped under her door. Inside was a handwritten note in neat, measured script. There is an opening for Director of Community Outreach. You once wrote that companies should measure their worth by how they treat people. Help me build that. Interview tomorrow, 9 a.m., if you choose to stay. LC. She read it twice, then again, heart-pounding. She had never seen his handwriting before, precise yet human, a trace of sincerity behind each letter. The next morning, she walked into the office building, not as the girl who was breaking but as the woman trying to rebuild. The receptionist smiled nervously, as if aware of the gossip already circulating. Everyone had heard that she quit, that the CEO locked the door and kept her there for hours. The story had grown wild legs overnight. When the elevator doors opened to the executive floor, Liam was waiting by the conference room, sleeves rolled up, tie missing. "Good morning, Mia," he said, his tone calm but unreadable. "You came. You invited me," she replied, trying to sound composed. He nodded. "Then let us begin." What followed was not a typical interview. There were no questions about profit margins or growth forecasts. Instead, he asked, "If you could rebuild this company from the inside out, where would you start?" Her answer came before she could second-guess herself. "With the people. You can buy loyalty, but you cannot buy purpose. People give that freely when they feel seen." Liam smiled faintly, scribbling something on his notepad. "And what would you need?" "Trust," she said simply, "and the authority to make small changes that mean something." "Done," he replied, closing the notepad. Her eyes widened. "Just like that?" "Just like that," he said. "You are not here for a test, Mia. You already proved everything I needed to know the night you refused to stop caring." His words settled in her like warmth spreading through cold hands. For a brief second, she saw something flicker in his expression. Admiration, maybe, or recognition. Later that day, as she walked through the building, she noticed small changes already unfolding. The break room was stocked again. The cleaning staff were laughing with new uniforms that actually fit. A bulletin board read, "Employee Wellness Initiative starting Monday." At the bottom corner, in fine print, was a signature LC. She could not help but smile. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she belonged somewhere that cared she existed. When she stepped into her new office, small, bright, overlooking the city, there was a single silver bracelet on the desk, engraved with one word, "Stay." She picked it up, her throat tight, and whispered to herself, "I think I will." Outside, the city hummed with noise and life. But inside, Mia finally felt something she had not felt in years' peace, and the quiet promise of a beginning. Weeks passed, and the office began to change in quiet, tangible ways. The air that once felt sharp with stress now carried something softer, almost hopeful. Employees started smiling again, small at first, like they were afraid it might vanish. Mia spent her days in the new community outreach department, writing programs that connected the company to charities and hospitals. Each proposal had a piece of her heart inside it, but she never expected how deeply those changes would ripple. One morning, Liam appeared at her office door, a cup of coffee in hand. "You still take it with 2 sugars, right?" he asked, a hint of humor in his tone. She looked up from her laptop, surprised that he remembered. "You should not be memorizing your employees' coffee orders," she said, smiling slightly. "Only the ones who keep me awake with their reports," he replied. It was the first time she heard him joke. He sat across from her, scanning the notes on her desk. "You are starting a volunteer mentorship program?" "Yes," she said. "I want to pair young employees with senior mentors. A lot of them feel invisible here, like I used to." He nodded slowly. "Good. That is exactly what we need." As he spoke, she noticed something different in him, less guarded, more human. The man who once spoke in deadlines and profits now asked about people's families, about their lives beyond the cubicles. And every time she saw that change, she wondered if she had somehow helped rebuild not just a company, but a man. That Friday, the company hosted its first employee appreciation dinner in years. The event was small but genuine, held in the rooftop garden overlooking the city lights. The skyline glowed gold against the dark sky. and laughter replaced the hum of exhaustion. When Mia arrived, she found her name card beside Liam's at the main table. "You planned this," she said, giving him a knowing look. "You earned it," he replied. Throughout the evening, she watched him interact with employees, listening, laughing, even dancing awkwardly with the accounting team when the music picked up. It was strange to see the man who once terrified the staff now being pulled into group selfies. When the night was winding down, Liam stepped aside and looked out over the city. Mia joined him, the breeze catching her hair. "It feels different up here now," she said quietly, "like the air is lighter." "It is," he said, "because for the first time, people believe they matter." He glanced at her, his voice softening. "And that started with you," her breath caught. "I just wrote a few proposals." "You rebuilt the foundation," he said, "and you reminded me what leadership means." There was a pause that stretched gently between them, the kind that did not need words. Below them, the city pulsed with life, and for once, neither of them felt like they were just surviving it. A few weeks later, Mia found herself in Liam's office again, but this time she was not crying. She was holding a folder filled with letters, thank you notes from employees, testimonials from families helped by their new programs. "You should read these," she said, placing the folder on his desk. "This is the real profit," he smiled, flipping through the pages. "You know, when I first started this company, I thought profit was measured in numbers. And now?" she asked. "Now I know it is measured in people like you." Her cheeks flushed, but before she could reply, there was a knock on the door. The HR director entered, looking nervous. "Mr. Carter, there is an issue with the outreach budget." "Handle it tomorrow," Liam said calmly. "Tonight, we are done." He turned back to Mia, his gaze warm. "Come on, let me walk you out." As they stepped into the hallway, the office was quiet, lit only by the glow of the city outside. They paused near the elevator, and for a brief moment, the silence felt familiar, the same quiet from the night she almost walked away. "You know," she said softly, "if you had not locked that door that night, I would not be here." He smiled, the memory flickering between them. "Then I am glad I did." The elevator chimed, and as the doors slid open, she looked back at him. "Good night, Mr. Carter." "Good night, Mia," he said, his voice low, almost tender. As the doors closed, he watched her reflection fade, the faint imprint of a smile still on his face. Outside, rain began to fall again, but this time it sounded less like an ending and more like a beginning. The following Monday began like any other, until a rumor rippled through the building that the board of directors had called an emergency meeting. The hallways buzzed with speculation. Mia sensed the tension as soon as she stepped out of the elevator. The smiles that had filled the office in recent weeks now faded to nervous whispers. When she reached her desk, an email was waiting in her inbox, short and formal. "Effective immediately, all new outreach programs are suspended pending review." Her stomach dropped. Hours later, Liam's assistant appeared at her door, his expression uneasy. "Mr. Carter needs you in the boardroom," he said. The air inside was heavy. Every seat around the long, polished table was filled with executives in tailored suits, their faces blank with corporate detachment. At the head sat Liam, his jaw tight. One of the senior partners, Mr. Reynolds, cleared his throat. "This company's spending has increased by 17% in the last quarter. The majority of that stems from these charitable experiments." His tone dripped with disdain. "They may be noble, but they are not sustainable." Mia stood frozen as every pair of eyes turned toward her. "You are responsible for this department, correct?" Reynolds continued. "Yes," she said carefully. "But these programs have improved employee retention and public reputation." "We are not running a charity," another board member interrupted. "We are running a business." Liam's hand clenched on the table. "Enough," he said, his voice quiet but sharp enough to cut through the tension. "Those programs are the reason we still have a company worth believing in." The room fell silent. Reynolds sneered. "Belief does not pay the bills, Carter." Liam leaned forward, his tone cold now. "Neither does greed." For a heartbeat, no one spoke. Then, unexpectedly, Reynolds turned his gaze toward Mia. "Maybe this young lady has convinced you with her sentimentality. But this is not how real leadership works." The words stung. Mia felt her throat tighten, but before she could respond, Liam spoke first. "She has done more for this company in 2 months than most of you have in 10 years. His voice was calm, but filled with conviction. "If you cannot see that, then maybe the problem is not her work ethic, But your lack of vision. The board erupted in murmurs. Reynolds stood abruptly. We will reconvene tomorrow, he snapped. As the directors filed out, Liam stayed seated, staring at the table as if trying to contain something boiling inside him. Mia waited until the door closed before speaking softly. You should not have defended me like that. They will blame you. He looked up, meeting her eyes. Let them. They can strip titles, but not truth. His words lingered, steady and fierce. That night, the office emptied quickly, the building sinking into quiet. Mia stayed late again, sorting through folders, her mind spinning. She wondered if she had done the right thing, if all her efforts had only made things harder for him. When she finally left her office, the lights on the executive floor were still on. Through the glass wall, she saw Liam sitting alone, the city skyline behind him. She hesitated, then gently knocked. You should go home, he said without looking up. So should you, she replied. He gave a tired smile. If I go home, I will only think about tomorrow. Might as well worry here. She stepped closer, noticing a faint tremor in his hand as he rubbed his temple. You are exhausted, she said quietly. You cannot fight them alone. He glanced at her, the fatigue in his eyes giving way to something softer. I am not alone, he said. Not anymore. The room fell into a calm silence, broken only by the faint hum of the city outside. For a long moment, they simply existed there, two people who had both carried too much for too long, finally sharing the same stillness. Then Liam reached into his drawer and took out a folder. I was going to wait, he said, sliding it across the desk. Inside were blueprints and handwritten notes. The title read, The Silverline Foundation. Mia looked up in surprise. You already started it? I had to, he said. It is your idea, our future. Her eyes filled with tears. They will never approve this. Then we will build it ourselves, he said firmly. Outside of the board, for every employee who ever felt unseen. She stared at him, realizing this was more than a project. It was a promise. You really mean that, she whispered. I do, he said softly. You taught me that people are not just resources, they are the reason. The city lights shimmered through the window, reflecting in their eyes like quiet constellations. In that moment, the fear that had haunted Mia since the night she tried to quit began to fade. Because she understood now, what had begun as a mistake was becoming something extraordinary. Not a job, not even just redemption. It was healing, shared and real. The next few weeks unfolded like the calm before a storm. Liam and Mia worked side by side, often late into the night, shaping every detail of the Silverline Foundation. It was meant to provide mental health care, financial assistance, and recovery time for employees who faced burnout, the kind of support neither of them had ever been given when they needed it most. The foundation quickly became more than a project. It was a shared purpose, a reflection of both their scars and their hope. Sometimes, when Mia looked up from the piles of paperwork, she caught Liam watching her with quiet admiration, a soft smile playing at his lips before he turned back to his computer as if he had been caught doing something unprofessional. The air between them began to shift, unspoken but undeniable. One night, after everyone else had gone home, Mia leaned back in her chair, rubbing her eyes. I think we are finally ready to present this, she said. Liam nodded, standing beside her. Ready, yes, but the board will not make it easy. They never do, she said with a small laugh. He smiled faintly, his tone thoughtful. Do you ever regret staying? She looked at him, surprised by the question. No, she said after a moment. Do you? He shook his head. Only that I did not see people like you sooner. The words hung between them, simple but heavy with meaning. The following day, the board convened once more, their expressions tense as Liam and Mia entered the room with their proposal. She stood beside him, calm but determined, as he began to speak. You all asked me what the future of this company looks like, he said. This is it. He clicked the remote, and the screen behind him lit up with the logo for the Silverline Foundation. He explained its purpose, its funding structure, and how it would rebuild not just the company's image but its humanity. People are not numbers, he said firmly. They are our greatest investment. Reynolds, the same partner who had dismissed Mia weeks before, leaned back with a smirk. And what happens when this idealism drains our profits again? Liam met his gaze without flinching. Then I will take the loss personally, but I will not lose my integrity. The room erupted in murmurs. For a moment, it seemed like the board might reject the idea outright, but then, an older woman at the far end spoke up. "My grandson works here," she said quietly. "He told me he almost quit before those outreach programs started. I think this company could use a little idealism." The room fell silent again. Slowly, a few hands went up in agreement. By the end of the meeting, the foundation was approved on a trial basis, but it was enough. As they stepped out of the boardroom, Mia exhaled shakily, her heart still racing. "We did it," she whispered. Liam smiled, the weight of weeks lifting from his shoulders. "No," he said. "You did it. I just followed your lead." She laughed softly, a mix of disbelief and joy. Later that evening, they found themselves alone in the rooftop garden again, the same place where the first employee dinner had been held. The city stretched out below them, glowing in the twilight. "It feels different this time," she said. "It is," he replied. "It feels right." A breeze swept through, carrying the faint scent of rain. She turned to face him. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for believing in me." "You made it easy," he said. "You reminded me what real strength looks like." They stood there for a while, the silence between them comfortable now. When she finally started to leave, he reached out, gently touching her wrist. "Mia," he said, his voice low but steady, "if I ever forget why I built this company, promise me you will remind me again." She smiled, her eyes reflecting the city lights. "I think you will remember on your own." As she walked away, the silver bracelet on her wrist caught the light, glinting like a quiet vow. Liam watched her go, realizing that somewhere along the way, the walls around his heart had cracked, and through those cracks, light had found its way in. 2 months later, the Silverline Foundation officially launched, and the change it brought was undeniable. Employees began to speak up, not out of fear, but out of pride. Mental health counselors were brought into the office, flexible schedules were introduced, and for the first time in company history, Carter and Lane received national recognition not for record profits, but for compassion. Reporters called it the company that found its heart again. Mia's days became a blur of meetings, calls, and visits to partner organizations. Yet even in the chaos, she carried a sense of peace that she had never known before. Liam often checked in, always under the guise of business, but his eyes said otherwise. One evening, as the sun dipped below the skyline, Mia was reviewing reports in her office when her phone buzzed. It was a message from Liam. "Can you meet me on the roof?" She hesitated, then smiled and grabbed her coat. The rooftop was bathed in the soft glow of city lights. Liam stood near the railing, his tie loosened, his sleeves rolled up, looking less like a CEO and more like the man behind the title. "You wanted to see me?" she asked. He turned, his face illuminated by the fading light. "I wanted to thank you," he said simply. "For what?" "For saving this place," he replied. "For saving me." She shook her head, laughing softly. "You give me too much credit." "Not enough," he said. "You showed me that leadership is not about control. It is about connection." There was a pause, filled with the hum of the city below them. "You know," she said quietly, "when I walked into your office that night to quit, I thought my life was falling apart, but maybe it was just falling into place." He smiled faintly. "Maybe it was meant to." Their eyes met, and for a brief second, the world around them disappeared. But before either could say another word, the sound of a door slamming behind them broke the silence. A familiar voice called out. It was Mr. Reynolds. "So this is where our new director of outreach spends her evenings," he said, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "No wonder the board is questioning your judgment, Carter." Mia stepped back instinctively. "Mr. Reynolds, this is not—" "Save it," he snapped. "You may have convinced the press that this foundation is noble, but we both know what this really is. Sentimentality, weakness, and now I see it as something worse." His eyes flicked between them, filled with smug satisfaction. "Personal." Liam's expression darkened. "Watch your words." "Or what?" Reynolds taunted. "You will fire me? The board will eat you alive for this. A scandal is the last thing this company needs." The tension in the air was electric. Mia could feel her pulse pounding. "This has nothing to do with you," she said firmly. "You are wrong," he sneered. "It has everything to do with me, because I still have a stake in this company, and I will not watch it fall apart because of some emotional experiment and a pretty face who does not know her place." The words cut deep, but before Mia could react, Liam stepped forward, his voice low but sharp as steel. "That is enough," he said. "You are right about one thing, Reynolds. You do have a stake here. But after tonight, you will not." "You cannot do that," Reynolds hissed. Liam pulled a folder from his briefcase, one he had clearly been waiting to use. "Actually, I can," he said calmly. "Your recent financial activities were flagged during our audit. Embezzlement, falsified expenses, and a charity donation fund that never reached its destination. I was going to handle this privately, but since you wanted an audience," he let the words hang. Reynolds' face drained of color. "You have no proof." Liam set the folder on the nearby table. "It is all here. Signed, sealed, and verified. Security is waiting downstairs." For once, Reynolds had nothing to say. He turned and stormed off, slamming the door behind him. The rooftop fell silent again. Mia stared at Liam, stunned. "You knew?" "For weeks," he said quietly. "But I wanted to be sure before I acted. Tonight was the last piece I needed." "Why did you not tell me?" "Because I did not want you to carry that weight," he said. "You have carried enough already." The wind whipped softly around them, cool and cleansing, as if the city itself exhaled with relief. For the first time in months, the storm that had hung over Carter and Lane had finally broken, and standing there under the night sky, Mia realized something: justice was not always loud. Sometimes, it looked like calm after chaos, like two people standing side by side, knowing they had finally done what was right. The fallout from that night spread quickly through the company, but not in the way anyone expected. By morning, news of Reynolds' dismissal had already reached every department. Whispers filled the hallways, but for once, they were not laced with fear. They were filled with pride. Employees spoke in quiet awe about how their CEO had stood up for what was right. Liam, however, said little. He spent most of that day behind closed doors, finalizing reports with legal counsel and ensuring every trace of corruption was removed from the company's books. When Mia stopped by to check on him, she found him sitting in silence, staring at the city through the floor-to-ceiling window. Papers were scattered across his desk, and the faint light of dusk framed his silhouette. "You did the right thing," she said softly. He turned toward her, his eyes tired but calm. "Doing the right thing does not always feel good." "No," she agreed, stepping closer. "But it feels honest." He exhaled slowly, leaning back in his chair. "I just keep thinking about how long I let people like him sit at that table. I built a company that rewarded results over respect, and it nearly cost us everything." "Then rebuild it," she said. "Not just the company, rebuild yourself too." Her words lingered in the air, quiet but resolute. He studied her for a moment before nodding. "Maybe that is what this foundation is really for." "For the employees?" "For all of us," he said. That evening, he invited her to join him at the hospital where the foundation's first community project was being launched. A new wing dedicated to mental health recovery had been funded through the company's donations. When they arrived, nurses and volunteers were setting up banners and flower arrangements. The plaque at the entrance read, "Silverline Recovery Center, because everyone deserves a second chance." Mia stood beside it, running her fingers over the engraved letters. "It is beautiful," she whispered. Liam looked at her, his expression softening. "So are you," he said without thinking. She froze, her breath catching. He quickly looked away, embarrassed by his own words. "I meant your work, what you have done here." But the warmth in his voice betrayed him. She smiled faintly. "Thank you." They walked through the new wing together, past rooms painted in calm blues and grays, past the mural of a sunrise that read, "Healing starts when we stop hiding." When they reached the end of the corridor, they stopped before a small window that overlooked the city. "You know," Mia said, "if someone told me a year ago that I would end up here standing beside the CEO I once feared, I would have laughed." "You were never afraid of me," he said. "You were angry. There is a difference." She chuckled softly. "Maybe both." "I deserved both," he admitted. Silence fell between them again, but it was not heavy. It was comfortable, like the pause between heartbeats. After the event, as they stood outside near the parking lot, Liam handed her a small box wrapped in silver paper. "What is this?" she asked. "Just open it," he said. Inside was a bracelet identical to the one she already wore, but this one had 2 words engraved instead of 1. "Stay brave." She looked up at him, speechless. "When you first walked into my office, you were ready to leave everything behind," he said quietly. "Now you are the reason everyone stays." "Liam," she began, but her voice faltered. "You do not have to say anything," he said. "Just keep fighting for what you believe in. That is enough." But as she stood there under the soft streetlights, she realized it was not enough anymore. Something had changed, something she could no longer ignore. The man who had once been her boss had become her anchor. And maybe, just maybe, she had become his reason to hope again. That night, when she returned home, she placed both bracelets on her nightstand. The old one marked "Stay," and the new one marked "Stay Brave." She ran her fingers over the silver surface, her heart steady for the first time in years. Outside her window, the city pulsed with quiet light, and she knew this was not the end of their story. It was only the calm before a new beginning. A full year passed before Mia realized how much her life had changed. The Silverline Foundation had become a national model for workplace wellness, praised for its balance between compassion and productivity. Carter and Lane was no longer just a corporation. It had become a movement. Every month, more companies adopted similar programs, citing the success of Liam and Mia's vision. On the morning of the foundation's first anniversary, the office buzzed with excitement. Reporters and guests filled the atrium, where a large banner read, "1 year of Silverline, because healing begins with hope." Mia stood backstage, holding her notes, her hands trembling just slightly. She had given hundreds of speeches by now, but this one felt different. This one was for them. "Nervous?" a familiar voice asked behind her. She turned to see Liam standing there, wearing a simple gray suit, and that same calm expression she had grown to trust. "Always," she admitted. "Good," he said with a small smile. "It means you still care." When the music faded, she stepped onto the stage. The audience quieted as she spoke. "A year ago, I almost walked away from this place. I thought I was too tired, too broken to continue. But someone locked the door and refused to let me give up." Laughter rippled through the crowd, and she glanced at Liam, who smiled knowingly. "Since then," she continued, "I have learned that healing is not about forgetting the pain. It is about transforming it into purpose." Every story shared, every life touched, has reminded me that kindness is not weakness, it is strength. The room filled with applause. Liam joined her on stage, and together they unveiled a new plaque for the next chapter of the foundation. The Silverline Scholarship Program, in honor of every employee who chose to stay. After the ceremony, as the guests mingled and photographers snapped pictures, Liam guided her to the rooftop where it all began. The air was crisp, the city glowing beneath them. "You did incredible," he said. "We did," she corrected. They stood in silence for a moment, both remembering that first night, the rain, the resignation letter, the locked door. "Do you ever think about that night?" she asked softly. "Every day," he said. "It was the night everything changed. For me, for this company, for us." She turned toward him, the city lights reflecting in her eyes. "Us?" He smiled faintly. "I know I should keep this professional, but after everything we have built together, I cannot pretend you are just an employee anymore." Her heart skipped. "Liam, you do not have to say anything," he said quickly, then paused. "But if there is even a part of you that feels the same, then maybe we stop pretending." The words hung between them, fragile and true. For a long moment, Mia said nothing. Then she reached into her purse and pulled out the bracelet he had given her. "Stay brave," she read aloud, smiling softly. "I think this is your answer." He took a slow breath, his eyes never leaving hers. "Then stay with me," he whispered. She laughed through tears, shaking her head. "You really need to stop turning my life into speeches." "Only if they come with a happy ending," he said. And for the first time, she let herself believe that maybe this was one. Months later, their story made headlines again, but not for business. Carter and Lane CEO, Mary's Foundation Director, in private ceremony, the article read. The photo showed them standing in front of the new Silverline building, sunlight streaming behind them, both wearing simple smiles that spoke louder than any words. At the ceremony, Mia's mother watched proudly from the front row, her health restored, her eyes glistening with joy. When the officiant asked for their vows, Liam said simply, "You once reminded me that people are the real foundation of every dream. You are mine." And Mia replied, "You once told me to stay." "I did, and it led me home." As they kissed, applause erupted, and the city beyond them seemed to shimmer with light. The rain that had marked their beginning now fell gently outside, not as sorrow, but as blessing. And in that quiet, golden moment, two people who had once stood on opposite sides of power finally stood side by side in love, in purpose, and in peace.